All right. Well, what was that? 6, 7? Goodness gracious. Look at y'all. I'm impressed. What you're learning is it's way easier just to stand up here and do it than it is to have to do a whole recording that is permanent on your record. Of course, this is permanent too, but who's going to go back and watch it every time? No one. And we might randomly throw your video up on a blog because y'all didn't know, but when y'all sign that thing, there's a little piece, a section that says we can reduplicate this anytime we want for any purpose. I'm just kidding. It doesn't say that. Yeah. For the one person who read the entire form, I'm just kidding. No, we're not going to share it unless we ask you permission first. So I'm pretty good though. I do want to clarify a couple quick things before I jump in. I don't know if I said this last week, but my goal is 2 pieces of feedback every week, not 20. So I'm going to give 2 pieces of feedback, just going through that many videos and trying to give adequate feedback on every single one. It's a lot of time. And of course, I would love to give you guys a lot of time, but I've set myself a expectation to do at least 2. So just know that it's not that I'm not watching it. I'm trying to get through them as quickly as possible. But in terms of a review, I try to give good, solid feedback, because if I give the wrong type of feedback or lazy feedback, it could go the opposite direction. And so that's why I'm only doing it. But my goal is to make it through every person at least one time throughout this study. Okay. So if I don't give you feedback in a week, it doesn't mean you did poorly. It just means I'm not giving you feedback that week. Are there any quick questions? We actually have a little bit of time. I knew we'd have more time, so I'm pretty excited that we have plenty. I don't have to rush through the content as much today. Any questions that you're rolling through on just logistics, getting through different things that I could answer? And if there are questions that I don't answer here that you found in the text, maybe some theological difficulties you ran into or just questions you had, I'll try to have 5 minutes at the end of this before 7 o'clock where we could just kind of have a brief discussion about it. And in the middle of this, we're going to have about a 5 to 10 minute activity. So set yourself up for it now. Have your phone available because you're going to put it into your notes or whatever notes app you use, or just email it to yourself, which is what I do a lot. But take that moment seriously, because it could be hopefully the most helpful portion of today. Because while I'm going to downloading only so much of that download is going to come into your brain, but the piece of that you're active in is going to be the most helpful. But that also being said, if you write stuff down that is being downloaded in front of you, it makes you some percentage more likely to remember it. And if you go immediately apply it, it makes you, I think, 80%. So I got that percentage, 80% more likely to retain the information. It was a Harvard Business Review article I read recently that it was talking about if you just hear something, you're like 10% likely, or you're 10% capable of retaining that information. And then if you immediately put it into practice, it goes up to 80%. That's one reason I always enjoyed how I went through seminary. Not that I chose it or was special, but I was full-time ministry while I was going through seminary. And so I'm seeing a lot of these guys go into academia and they're not working in church or doing ministry. It's like, well, I'm going to study. I'm like, well, you're going to retain it, like very little of that. And then 10 years from now, when you're actually in ministry, some of that's going to be really difficult for you to remember. But I was able to immediately infuse it into my workplace. And so the goal is that as we leave from here, last week's principle was leaders figure crap out. I hope you were able to implement that, whether it's at home with your family or with some study you're doing or at your workplace. That stuff's immediately accessible. Maybe your boss has been asking you to do something and you're scared to ask them a question, but you're also concerned you can't figure something out, so you're not putting forth the diligence in order to figure that stuff out. Well, maybe you were able to implement that last week, and this week I hope it will be the same in a lot of ways. So there are a couple possible topics. I'm going to jump right into it. I always put that just because it helps me go through the entirety of the text and say, I don't want to miss anything about what we can accomplish. And I texted y'all this morning, so y'all are welcome to pull up exactly what I'm going through right here. It's the full outline. of what I'm going through, but it is just an outline. So the things I say, it'll just help you to have that. But I put these possible topics up there because I'm just looking for every nook and cranny through these 6 chapters that we did, 7 technically, if you count 10, to find what the best topic to relate to you guys would be. Additionally, and secretly, I'm trying to find a topic that I don't think you're gonna do, which is increasingly difficult as we go through Second Chronicles. So this one's gonna line up a little bit. I think there are gonna be some things that I pull out that you guys didn't pull out, but all I have to say, you should be happy with yourselves that you're pulling out similar content, and that, I mean, the amount of times I've heard people actually articulately talk about Second Chronicles after Solomon, like today, right? So just, you should be excited about the fact that you're going through a really obscure book for most people, and you're pulling out solid content. So I'm already impressed. I'm excited. So here are a couple topics, and you might as well go through this outline with me, but you can also go through the text with me. Starting in chapter 10, there are a couple topics that I thought I could bring out. One of them was that leaders read between the lines, and I'm in Second Chronicles 10. Okay. So when I put that, I was thinking through the context of Jeroboam and Rehoboam. So Rehoboam coming into this situation after Solomon dies, there's a whole context to the situation with Jeroboam that you find in First Kings. And it's quite a complicated situation. In fact, Jeroboam was kind of a problem with Solomon, a huge portion of his kingship, if you will. And then he goes into exile, and then he becomes a problem for Rehoboam when Rehoboam comes into it. And so knowing that Rehoboam was coming in with Jeroboam having some sort of allegiance from the other 10 tribes of Israel, he should have understood what was happening and read between the lines of what specifically Jeroboam says in chapter 4. Your father made our yoke hard. Now, therefore, lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke, which you put on us, and we will serve you. Jeroboam has, he says that, but he's got a plan in place. He knows what he's trying to do. He's not dumb. And so Rehoboam takes the bait. And I think great leaders will read between the lines and see the intent of the people who are honest and the intent of people who are trying to mess them over. And Jeroboam, in this case, is trying to screw Rehoboam up, and it works. And Rehoboam wasn't a great leader. Next one, this was a very common one. Leaders take wise counsel. That's the whole scene where Rehoboam goes to the old advisors and the young advisors, and he takes the advice of his cronies, the guys he grew up with, who are just trying to, I don't know, they're just bad leaders. And so leaders take good advice. Proverbs says, wise is someone who has many counselors. He had many counselors, but like you said, John, he didn't listen to them. The next thing I had is leaders aren't scared of shadows. And what I mean by that is you see Rehoboam, a lot of his motivation is dictated by not wanting to be seen as lesser than his father. All of this is a comparison. Solomon did this. What are you going to do? Well, I'm going to be stronger than my father Solomon. And so he makes decisions based on insecurity and comparison to his father. The next one, leaders, there's typos there. But leaders know their territory. What I mean by that is you see in chapter 10, 16 through 19, that I don't want to waste too much time here. I write these and then I forget them sometimes. I don't know. Point is, Rehoboam should have known better about his territory. My bad. Totally forgot about that. We're going to skip the next one because that's going to be today. Leaders work with what they have. Chapter 11, verses 5 through 12. This is where I see some decent leadership from Rehoboam. He recognized through the prophecy that he was not going to be able to jump into the other 10 tribes and get them to do much of anything. And so he pulls back and focuses on the 2 that he has. I could go in further to that, but I think I'll do a little bit of that today. The next one, same thing. Leaders keep what they can. Leaders put trust in the right places. And that's where at 11, verse 23, It says he acted wisely, distributed some of his sons through all the territories of Judah and Benjamin to all the fortified cities, and he gave them food in abundance, and he sought many wives for them. So what's he doing? He is putting people in the right places. He's putting trusted individuals actually in the right places. And so he's really planning and thinking ahead on how he can accomplish something in the future. And we also see that Rehoboam had the priesthood, and that was a big deal, especially later on. Leaders take bold action. We'll talk more about that today. Leaders tear down barriers and they build structure. That's chapter 14, when we start seeing Asa doing reforms after Abijah. And then leaders end well. And that was chapter 16, where we see how Asa ended by imprisoning the prophet. What prophet was that? Oh my gosh, why am I blanking on his name? Hanani, the seer or prophet. So those are a couple possible topics. There were a lot that I skipped over because my brain started going in one direction, and I figured let me go ahead and do this download. But as you see, there are ways to, like, even a bad leader, you can see opportunities for you to learn. And so I'd encourage you to continue looking for those things. You might challenge yourself over the next 3 weeks and say, hey, I know everyone's going to do this one. What's something that I really have to search for in order to find some sort of nugget? What I always say when people always come up to me and they say, like, your sermon wasn't deep, or I want deeper teaching. And I'm kind of like, well, I know how deep the teaching was, but I wonder if you were looking for the gold nuggets in the teaching. So what I try to do is I try to drop gold nuggets. I'll throw out the Greek or something like that periodically, because there's always someone who wants that. But for the most part, there are people in the room who they're going to get confused. And I don't want to cause confusion for the person who came in off the street. And so I'd encourage you, everything you encounter, my old pastor, he would say, always be connecting. And so whether you're encountering something at your workplace, reading scripture, listening to a sermon, having a conversation with somebody, always be seeking what God has for you in those moments. Find those gold nuggets, and that will really help you interpret the text as well. So let's jump in for today. There were various ways that I was trying to come up with a title for it. Like I had a title this morning called Leaders Take Mountains, and I was thinking through, like, they go for mountains, not molehills. Leaders pick the right battles. Leaders, like, they have an acumen or an awareness of their own ability to accomplish something. And so they are rigid when it comes to the areas of their control. And so what I put was leaders know when to take the L. And I put it that way because I guess I'm trying to be creative, but there are two ways I want to talk about leaders taking the L. The first, leaders know when to cut their losses. And we see that with Rehoboam, the guy who's kind of a horrible leader for the most part. I think Rehoboam gets a worse rap than maybe he should in comparison to some of these other kings. But, he followed Solomon, so stinks for him. And there are a lot of things he had to figure out. But I do think when he heard the prophecy about Jeroboam, and it became clear to him that he was not going to be able to reunite all of Israel, and that he was going to lose 10 out of 12 people groups or tribes to Jeroboam, he made the decision to pull back, cut his losses, and reinforce. And I think that was a good leadership decision. He listened to his advisors, and the reality was, whether it was his fault that this happened or not, he still eventually figured out when to cut his losses. The other area I want to talk about taking the L is kind of the rest of the passages, where you see Abijah and Asa. And when I say take the L, I mean, they just know when to tap into the power of God when they are powerless. And so it's kind of similar. It's like, I am at the end of my own strength, and it's time for me to rely on something greater than myself. I think great leaders know when to take the L personally. So whereas Rehoboam pulls back and reinforces, some of us get to the place where, like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I got to recognize when I'm at the end of my own strength. And in these cases, we see Abijah and Asa take the Lord into battle with them. In ours, yes, take the Lord, but What about recognize when you're at the end of your own strength and you need to not only take the Lord, but just incorporate the people the Lord has placed around you. Sometimes taking the Lord with you means taking the Lord's people with you. It is recognizing when you are at your own end and either pulling back or lurching forward with a bigger group or with a higher power. There's only one higher power, just FYI. I mean, there's higher power than me. Like Pastor John's a higher power for me. Like anyways. So you get what I'm saying. All right. So let's talk through this. How does the text kind of indicate that? With Rehoboam, he takes the loss because of his own fault. Like a lot of the reasons we're incapacitated or limited or there are barriers in front of us is because of things that we have done. And Rehoboam screwed himself over. He really did. I don't know what would have happened had Rehoboam listened to the wiser counselors. I don't know what would have happened had he been smarter when he heard Jeroboam make the comment about the yoke from Solomon. I don't know what would have happened. We see what history gives us. But had he been a little bit more intelligent in the way that he led, Israel might not have divided into two kingdoms. Can't really say that because there was a prophecy that said it would happen. Again, it's in history. But Rehoboam suffered the consequences of either prophecy or his own incapable leadership. And because of that, he had limited himself. And so some of us as leaders, we are limited. And I need you to understand that. Anyone who told you just follow your passions and it's going to work out. True. Yeah, to an extent. But I hear Simon Sinek all the time. He said, they tell me, follow my passions, follow my passions. That's very unhelpful because you have limitations. I'm not going to tell a person who caps out at 5'3" that they're going to go be a star basketball player. It's not going to happen. There are limits. Now, that is a biological or genetic limitation, but there are also limitations based on our history, based on what we have encountered. There are some things I will never be able to do because of how my history went. Might have been nature, might have been nurture, might have been bad decisions that I made, but I am limited now, okay? And so if you can recognize that you have limits, then you'll know where to pull back and where to launch forward. You got to have a unique awareness of that. And leaders know where they're weak and they know where they're strong. And so you got to know when to take that out. And stop crying over spilt milk. I mean, you got to become aware of it. You got to know how it affects you psychologically and emotionally. Yes, look at your past and allow it to influence or help you in the right ways, but just move forward. And you might write down something that you've been wanting to do, but maybe your history and your own past decisions have inhibited you from doing so. One pastor told me one time because somebody wanted to step into leadership at a really high level, but the decisions they had made in the past scripturally made them, had inhibited them or prevented them from being able to do so. And the person just really, really wanted something. And the pastor told me, because I was wondering how to work in this situation, he just said, hey, you know, there's a wide array of opportunity for every person. And there is a small segment of limitations for the same people. And those limitations, nature, nurture, decisions, they prevented them from stepping in that direction. So choose to go in the areas where you're capable. And so I want to encourage you, choose to go in the areas that you're capable. I'm not saying you're limited. Nothing is impossible with God, but let's be real with ourselves. At this point in your life, you're not going to be a star basketball player. I'm just looking around, right? Like Jake, you came to a point in your life where you recognized your physical limitations were going to prevent you from going further in football. And it was an injury. It wasn't necessarily your fault, and probably other stuff too, like desires and whatever. But like, there's a point, recognize it. And so what he does is he pulls back. We're still on Rehoboam. He pulls back and he strengthens the borders for protection, and he increases his focus on building projects so that he can make what he has effective. How poor of a leader will we look back on Rehoboam? We already look back on him like he's horrible, but at least I'm being nice to him today. But how poor of a leader would he be if he continued in the civil war constantly? Now, there were skirmishes, but if he had continued in the civil war and tried to continue expanding the borders when it wasn't going to happen, he would have been horrible, and there would have been a huge loss of life. Too many dead soldiers at the front to build anything or to strengthen anything. And then he also recognized where he was strong, and he pulled back on that. Rehoboam recognized he had the temple. He's got some of these other things. He is the central religious structure of both places. Israel's going to have to go through and build something on Mount Gerizim to make something work. They're going to have to figure their own stuff out. So what does Rehoboam have? I got the priests. And so the priests are still loyal. And then eventually he starts putting people in strategic areas so it's not a problem. This is what Rehoboam does. And I think though he failed up front, he became a more effective leader as he recognized where he was strong. I'd encourage us to do the same. Abijah and Asa, it's kind of a different situation. They were effective at bringing the Lord into battle with them. So Abijah comes in immediately after Rehoboam. The civil war goes crazy. This happens at the end of different kingships. Someone new comes in. This is the time to step in and make something happen. And so Jeroboam, I don't know exactly how it happens. I did a lot of research on it, and it looks like Mount Zemaraim is right at the border of Judah and Israel, and it's kind of up in a little bit of hill country. So my theory, this is not validated by scholarship because scholars can't really locate Mount Zemaraim effectively. They can't really tell us what the context of that battle was. There's so little scholarship on this. But looking at it, I have a theory that Abijah is simply responding to Mount Jeroboam encamping around them. And we know this because Jeroboam does a pincer movement and attacks from the front and from behind. They are more ready with, I think it's 800,000 troops, and Abijah has about 400,000. And whether it's they have the high ground, whether it's that the Lord stepped in because the people of the Lord cried out when they got attacked by this pincer movement from Jeroboam, I don't know exactly what it was. Obviously, the Lord was helpful in that battle. But they, with 400,000 people with the high ground, take 500,000 from Jeroboam, and they win this battle. And this is an example of when they reach their own limits because they have way less people and because they're being attacked from the front and behind, they bring in a higher power and authority that helps them get through it. And there's probably a lot of intelligence from Abijah there. And then Asa, he took the Lord seriously. So he took the L in a different way. He took him seriously. What did he do? He came in and he broke down barriers. And when I say barriers, these are barriers to approaching God. He gets rid of some of the buildings and the idols at the high places. He gets rid of all of these different things that are negative in terms of people's interaction with God. And then he starts enhancing the structure. And then there's some battles that Asa wins against Bashta, or however you say his name. And he's just very intelligent for the most part. And then at the end of his life, he fails because he tries to incorporate the king of Aram, I believe. Oh my gosh. He tries to incorporate the king of Aram, pays them to help him against Israel. And then God gets frustrated because it's like, I won battles for you, your whole kingship. And now, what's going on, man? And so it's interesting. I think overall, Asa has a good impression. Second Chronicles even gives Abijah a good impression, whereas First Kings gives Abijah a very bad impression. Says he was an evil king. I don't know what to do about that, but that's what the Bible says. So the point I take from that, and this is something to keep in mind, they're human beings. So let's roll with that. So many villains I like because there's some things that they do well. All right, so let's move forward into the specific leadership points. And you're going to see that I have some just basic formulas I go through, because if I don't start with a framework, I'm just going to go crazy. So I start with a framework and then I shift it based on what the needs are. And you're going to see that there's a lot of stuff here. We probably won't go through all of it. But specifically, I like to bring it into the New Testament because it can be very difficult to talk through Second Chronicles and feel spiritual. So I always like to bring some of these concepts into the New Testament, just so you're 100% positive that these leadership principles are not just guesses as we look at bad kings in Second Chronicles. So when it comes to taking the L in general, and what I mean is by scaling back, becoming aware of your actual ability to accomplish something, choosing the right battles, and then surrendering when you're weak to your team, or to the Lord, this is what I think Jesus calls us to do. So when I look at Jesus's life, I see that he picked his battles. And sometimes I don't understand the battles that he picked. What I put here is like he'll avoid confrontation in the city. John actually tells us he hid himself. And that's super interesting. I don't know if he disappeared or just walked away and the disciples protected him. But, John's super spiritual in that way. He avoids confrontation in the city, but he chooses confrontation when he gets to the temple. And he goes crazy with it. He, not literally, but you know what I mean? He just starts flipping tables, fashioning a whip and trying to whip these people who are selling stuff in the temple. You made this place a den of robbers. It's supposed to be a house for the nation. Jesus gets frustrated. He picked the battles and it was unique. Like he heals the withered man with the withered hand in the synagogue, yet he tells the people he heals on the street sometimes to be silent. I don't fully understand every aspect of it, but hey, we'll see you later, man. He has to go to work. But I see that he chooses battles, and I'm still trying to glean the wisdom through a lot of these things, but he does choose them. He chooses who to heal, when to heal. He chooses who to talk to. He chooses when to go crazy and be bold. And then other times he scales back and says, don't tell people about me. He's choosing back and forth, and I don't understand the wisdom behind it, but I recognize that even though Jesus was God and he had all authority, he limited himself intentionally so that he could accomplish what he genuinely wanted to accomplish during his 3 years. And we need to do the same. When you see Paul, I mean, he'll tell you these different things. He'll say, put on the whole armor of God and resist the enemy, the spiritual enemy. Yet in Romans, he'll tell us to submit to the governing authorities and promote what is good under the Emperor Nero. Which battles are you going to choose? And I don't fully understand it, but it seems like Paul is more about focusing on resisting the spiritual enemy than he is the physical one. And in the same way, let's start picking our battles. Let's learn when to take the loss. Let's learn when to tap into the Lord. Let's pick our battles. Let's take the L because God wants us to do that. And that's just 2 examples. I can give you a million more, but I don't want to spend too much time talking about that. So let's get really practical. So when it comes to picking our battles, the issue is it's difficult. It's difficult to choose which battles you're gonna fight. I struggle with this constantly in leadership. It's like, is this important? And then I'll tell myself it's not important, and then it'll frustrate me for the next 6 weeks because I didn't do anything about it. Or I'll tell myself I shouldn't care or that it is important, and when I tell myself it is important, I focus so much on a small thing and I tell myself that it's going to make a big difference, even though it's a small thing because it's cultural or because I'm passionate about it or any litany of reasons that I would give to say something's important. When in the reality, 6 weeks later, I've been putting a lot of energy towards something and it hasn't moved the needle in the slightest. Or it ticks people off at you unnecessarily. I'm real big on that. I don't mean to, but I do. And you guys do the same way in different ways. You might not be as bold as me at challenging a status quo, but you might sit there just brooding over something. Let's talk about husbands and wives for a second. You got to pick your battles. I think wise spouses pick their battles. They learn when to scale back and say, I don't need to win this issue. Or they learn when to say, Lord, I need your help here because I can't change anything on my own. So let's do this activity. We're actually going to take 5 minutes toward it because I've run my mouth way too much. And it's either How to Win Friends and Influence People or 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think it's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Stephen Covey talks about circles of concern. And I don't know if it's that one either because I think that's Carnegie. Either way, it's Stephen Covey who comes up with it. And he talks about the idea of circles of concern versus circles of influence. So what I want you to do is pull out your phone for a second. And I want you to pick 3 to 5 things that you stress out about, or 3 to 5 things you're about to have a battle about, or 3 to 5 things you want to fight about. It could be in your family, could be with your kids, could be with your boss, could be with your organization. And what I want you to do after you write those things out is I want you to put them in the right area. So they're kind of a concentric circle. A circle of concern is a big circle. So these are the things I care about. Like I care about the Ukrainian situation. I really do. But a smaller circle inside that bigger circle is the circle of influence. I have 0 influence over the Ukrainian situation. So that goes in the area of concern, but does not go in the area of influence. And what Covey would say is, in order to choose the right battles, you need to locate them in the right circle. You got to locate them in your area of influence. Because what's the point in fighting a battle if it's not in your area of influence? That's when you take the L for yourself personally and start praying about it, right? So I want to give you a second to do that. Y'all do it too. No one's, okay, y'all are. They're doing great. Well, for those of y'all who wanted a Bible study, I went heavy into the Bible today. All right. For time's sake, I'll jump right back in. But that might be a good exercise for you today. Similar to energizing and draining the activity, where you just pick what energizes you, pick what drains you. This will be a good activity for you, even if you just have a piece of paper you keep with you with a big circle and a smaller circle inside of it. And if you're thinking about fighting with somebody, or if you're thinking about challenging the status quo, or trying to adjust something, or proposing something new to your boss, it's just another change on your list of 10 changes that you're proposing. Like, is it in your area? If it's not, there are a lot of things in your area that you can focus on and run hard with. Here are a couple quotes I had that you can read later, but I think they're helpful. If you make a huge fuss over something silly, you may not be able to get your way when it's something really important. The smartest people calculate what is worth their time and energy. And I am the worst at wasting energy on things that are not worth my time. So here are a couple questions you can ask when it comes to these concentric circles we just talked about. One, what can you control? Is it something that's in your scope? Is it your responsibility? Can somebody else do it? How important is this decision? Is it a company decision where there are great stakes? Is this an experiment? If it doesn't work out, will it be uncomfortable, or will it be a catastrophe? And a real basic example in my life is I love experimenting. There are a lot of things that I think we could do as an organization more effectively. I'm sure you've got your own list of what Forest Park Church could do more effectively. But I've probably gone in 30 to 40 times in my year and a half here and made a proposal for an adjustment. That can become taxing over a while. And I'm probably exaggerating just for the sake of argument. And some of these things, if we made these adjustments and they don't work out, could be really significantly negative for the organization. So anyways, those are some good questions to ask. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to focus on the mountains and not molehills? How are we going to fight the right battles? First thing you're going to do, and these are things that are here, but you might write them down just to remember them. You're going to assess your ability to even start that conversation internally. Do you have the authority to accomplish something? Do you have the reputation to accomplish something? It might not be an authority issue. People just might not trust you. Like, a lot of times people come in here and they'll suggest to Caleb what worship song he should do. And I'm like, so what's your, not authority, you definitely don't have that, but what's your reputation? It's your reputation to make a million suggestions? And I'm not mad at people for it. What's your reputation in terms of worship music? Do you just listen to Caleb? Do you play any instruments? Have you led worship before? And these aren't things we're assessing intentionally. It's just what naturally comes to mind. Before you make a suggestion on something, assess whether you have the authority to do it, and assess whether you have the reputation. Because if you don't have the authority, but you have the reputation, I'll listen to you in 2 seconds. I'll listen to volunteers all the time over staff members because they have a great reputation. Like Derek Towery is a good example. All of you have great examples, but Derek Towery is a good example. He works with youth ministry. He's done it longer than half the youth ministries that I've worked with. So he has a reputation that I want to listen to. It's just one example. Here's the next one. Not only assessing your ability, let's start with the solution. Start with a solution. Don't bring problems if you don't have a solution. I hate it. And what I wrote here is really clear because it'll help you in any area of your life. If you don't have a solution, shut up, please. Please. And again, sometimes you're going to have to bring problems as a conversation, but that's where you're already in the conversation a lot of times. How many times someone comes up to you, they offer a problem and it stresses you out, and now you're trying to find a solution, but they brought no effective solution. I want to encourage you, come up with a solution. It goes into last week. Let's figure crap out. And part of figuring crap out, you realize the reputation you will gain if when you bring a problem or a suggestion, you have a solution. It might not be the solution, but it's a solution, and it will help your reputation with the people you're talking to. The next one, here's really practical. Rate the importance of what your issue is or what your battle is on a scale of 1 to 10, and drop anything that falls below a 6 out of 10. There are a lot of 7 to 10s on the scale. Drop the ones below it. And I'm learning this in the organization. And some questions you can ask is there a choice? Do we have to solve this problem? If not, let's rate it. If we have to solve this problem, it falls above a 6 every single time. And there's some problems we have to solve. COVID hits. We got to figure out how to get people back in church. We got to. Or we got to figure out how to get church to people. That's a problem we got to solve. We just got to. So we worked on it. Now, a separate problem is we're trying to get people back to church. Well, some people are coming back to church. We've already got a platform for them to watch online. Is this an issue I need to fight really hard on? I don't know. It's a hard question. Let's decide that as an organization and as leaders. How crucial is it to the organization? If your organization doesn't care about it, but you do, let's talk. It's a conversation. Or your organization might not care about it, but it is so deep in terms of your personal conviction, you won't do anything different. Well, that's an important issue. There's some for me, there's just like, there've been cultures at different churches I've been a part of that if in my personal convictions, either it has to change or I'm going, right? Some of those things are real big issues. It might be a moral issue. It might be a culture fit issue. And that's a decision where either it's got to change, and I'm going to put, there's a couple right now, not here at the church, but just in general, where whatever organization I might be a part of, it's like, it's going to change and I'm going to help it change. And if it doesn't, well, then we need to go into more drastic circumstances. And that's not here, just to be clear. The next one, get proof of concept. Get proof of concept. Why? And we see this a lot because a lot of church is project oriented. And so people will bring ideas. So we're on a lead team. As a campus pastor, I'm on the lead team, and the staff will bring ideas. And sometimes they'll bring ideas and immediately want us to announce it from stage as the biggest idea ever. And I'm just like, does it work? Have we tested it to see if it'll work? I remember telling one staff member they wanted to do this huge outreach thing. They came in the lead team to present it. And I said, hey, this could be the best thing since sliced bread in ministry. Have you ever tried it? They said, well, I tried it. I said, okay. Anyone else? Cool. What if we got 15 people to try it? And if they all do it and they're passionate about it, that gives me the confidence to say, well, let's invite everybody to do it. But if one person does it and they're passionate about it, that's not necessarily a test case or proof of concept that it works for everybody. Because we recognize some people have different foci in their lives. And staff members are focused on ministry, whereas others aren't necessarily. So you got to get proof of concept, get support behind what you're doing, get counsel, test the waters. I said here, be a builder, not a blimp. What I mean by that is a builder is going to be someone who's okay starting in obscurity, knowing that organically they're going to build something. Every small group I've ever started, guys, starts with like 4 or 5 people. And I'm a pastor. It's going to start small. It's not going to start big. But as you build it, it becomes something over time. And then people figure, college group starts, there's like 5 to 10 people in it. None of them coming to church. No offense for the ones who started in the group. Anna was coming to church, Jake periodically. But now they're committed, right? So it takes time to get things going. So be a builder, not a blimp. A blimp is super visible, full of hot air. A builder is somebody who builds something from the ground up. All right. So the last thing on that is choose a place to cut your losses. Then there are some other things that aren't as important into this conversation. Number 4 is just how to take the L, meaning here's some really specific things you can do to be better at it, like detaching your emotions, remembering failure's normal, using the opportunity to pivot and learn, and then shifting your focus to the areas, not of concern, but areas of influence. And then number 5 is the battles that you need to fight. If you're convicted, Or anyways, those are the battles you need to fight. This is not something. Anyway, sorry. Leaders take the L. Let me pray for us. Father God, we thank you for today. We thank you for this crew. God, I pray that they would continue to grow and learn and develop content over this time, that it would invigorate in them what you've given them in terms of the ability to create. And God, I pray that they would get excited about these things. Every time they use the gifts you've given them, every time they come to awareness of what you've placed in them, God, they're going to have joy more abundantly. And so I just pray that they would discover those things daily. And as we leave from here, let us never leave from your presence. Let us focus, be better leaders. This in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.